Jagex have a big problem on their hands, and they have done for some time. And we're going to talk about it today. And if you can't tell, I am talking about rewards coming into old school RuneScape. Did you guys know that that well right there, the real ones know, Jagex have just released another blog on the final dawn, and I think it's become pretty obvious at this point that they are somewhat struggling with deciding what the rewards are going to be for the content. If any of you guys don't know what the content is, they're planning on releasing a new endgame, specifically endgame, catering towards 120 combat plus boss, which is going to be in a wave form. It's always waves. Jagex love waves. We got waves for everything nowadays, but planning on releasing this new content, and effectively it's going to have 8 waves, and you can choose to stay at the hardest part of it. So when you get to wave 8, you can choose if you want to stay there and keep repeating that wave. And effectively, you're going to get better loot by doing so, a higher chance of getting the uniques. And it's a gamble, because you get an extra chance of getting better uniques, but at the same time, if you die, you lose everything. So it's a very interesting concept, and I think that the concept itself is a good one. Now, the problem itself doesn't lie with the content. The concept's good, but the rewards that are being pitched, they're a little bit lackluster. And I think this is a problem that is more than just with this new boss. I think this is a problem that the old school team has had now for the longest time. Now, obviously, it is a problem not being able to figure out the rewards that you have for bosses that come out and content. There is a silver lining here. I mean, at least they are delivering good content, right? It's not like it's flipped on its head and the rewards are really good and the content's really bad, because I would say that'd probably be more of a problem. And to be honest, I do think we have to give props to Jagex. Those of you clicking on this video that fucking hate them, disliking it right now, I can read your angry comments, but we have to give them credit, because, boys, the content that they're releasing, some of the stuff they've been able to achieve on this janky JavaScript 20-year-old game, it's phenomenal, you know? It's like, if you go back to all of the bosses that we used to have back in like the 2000s, it's like we had the KBD, the Calfight Queen, the Barrow Brothers, then we had Gold War Dungeon, and all of these bosses are basically encounters where you just click the boss, click your food, kill the boss, rinse and repeat. Now, when you compare those bosses to the kind of content that we get nowadays, right, it's like, take the Corrupted Gauntlet, which is an entire mini-game with a boss at the end of it that has its own unique mechanics, or the Fasoni's Nightmare, or like Zuck, and you see all of the really cool, interesting ways that they've overcome these like janky coding problems, and they've made them really engaging. Like, you have to engage with the mechanics in order to overcome the boss. So I just want to point out that the actual content itself is fantastic. They truly have done a wonderful job. Let's now address the problem with the Final Dawn and the blog that they've just put out. So there are basically 2 rewards that I'd say are probably the most significant. So you're effectively getting a boot upgrade, and you're also getting a slight buff to the Mage Amulet or the Occult Necklace. And that buff that you're getting is a +2 mage damage, there's a little bit of accuracy, and I think it's like 1 prayer. I don't know why they're so obsessed with this prayer thing, but it is what it is. And the boots, I think the boots concept is pretty cool actually, because it combines all 3 of the best boots, so the Eternal Boots, the Pegasians, and the Primordials, all into one boot. And you can see how that would be quite useful, right? But this is where the problem occurs. It's like, if you've got what could potentially be one of like the most endgame challenging pieces of content coming out into old school RuneScape, is a +2 mage damage boost and like a combination of boots really enough for that level of difficulty and the gamble that you take with that content? Like, if you want a chance of getting those uniques, chances are you're going to have to sit in wave 8, which is going to be very difficult, and you're probably going to have a slim chance of getting those rewards, and you can lose all of it if you were to die, right? So it ultimately comes down to risk versus reward, and I think a lot of other people agree that the reward doesn't quite match the risk. And if you were to take this new content that they're proposing and you were to compare it to, say, Nex, for example, it's like, Nex is effectively like a 2007 boss, like a God War Dungeon boss, where you effectively click boss, click potion, kill boss, rinse and repeat, with a few extra steps in there. Next has some mechanics, but to be honest with you, you can brute force a lot of it, right? That's what I'm getting at. And that boss has the best in slot melee armor. Like, melee armor in pretty much any MMORPG is like the staple that people look at. Like, let's be honest, if you look at any game, you're probably going to take a look at the armor, the end game armor, and it's like, that's the goal. That's what I want to get my hands on. It drops the best in slot melee armor. It drops the best in slot spec weapon in the game, the Jagex crossbow, which is an upgrade for the armored crossbow, and it has the best in slot range vamps. And this is coming from a boss, which I would say isn't that difficult to kill. You can brute force it, and there's just like an array of really, really good items that you can get from it. I think this has been a problem in the game for quite a long time now. Jagex have always had difficulty with adding new content to the game and having the rewards be adequate to whatever the difficulty of that content is. And I think now in 2025, I feel like it's kind of showing more than ever. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised why that is the case. Obviously, Jagex are very sensitive and concerned, rightfully so, of power creep, which is something that, looking at the way that they approach the game, I would say that they've learned their lessons from the past, and the past that I'm referring to was the RuneScape 2 days, before it became EOC, RuneScape 3, etc. And ultimately, I think that this boils down to an incredibly important question, which is, when is it okay to increase the power level? E.g., when is it okay, when is it appropriate to power boost? It's not okay. It's never okay. Bring everything down. Because at the moment, the way that Jagex have approached these things, like if you take the necklace, for example, that is being pitched as one of the drops from this new piece of content, it's +7 magic damage, right? Now, last year, when they did the project rebalance, they took the occult necklace from 10%, and it was 10% magic damage. It's now 5. They halved it. And now they're giving us a reward which is +2 mage damage, right? So that is the approach the Jagex have taken in recent times, which is basically nerfing stuff and then giving us the rewards which are making it slightly better, but not quite as good as what it was. And I think this raises probably the most important question, which is, when is it okay for the power level to creep up? E.g., when is it okay that we do get a new best in slot armor or best in slot weapon, right? And I'm not saying that they should just go ahead and add that to this new game, the mini game that they're talking about, but to me, it does seem like it's inevitable that at some point there is going to have to be that next level. And don't get me wrong, guys, I think that they've done a fantastic job so far with managing power creep in the way that items that were previously best in slot, they've found ways to utilize them with the new best in slots. Like take Torva, for example. You have to break down Bandos in order to make it. So it effectively keeps the old content relevant, and that in itself, I think, is a very clever and good way to do this. If we go back to the project rebalance that I was talking about, that's given the JMods so much room to breathe with new content. Like, it's insane because they've added like elemental weaknesses to pretty much every boss or most of the bosses in the game. So to me, when I see the rewards that they've just pulled for this new boss, it just seems a little bit lackluster. Like, I don't think that they've been all too creative with it, because there's like endless possibilities of items they could add into the game, which could effectively be completely different to what we've seen right now. Look at him. What do you want, boy? He wants me to throw the stick. Who do you belong to? Not that lady. Whose are you? I reckon he's just got out. You want to have a go? Right, you ready? Go on. I reckon it's that lady up there. You're not mine. Oh no. I think that's probably what it boils down to quite a lot, is it just seems very lackluster, the rewards that they've pulled for this new content. Not to mention there are a few other things in there, like there's a two-handed axe, which I think is effectively like a Demon Bane weapon, which is similar to the Emberlight but for crush. But it's definitely nothing that's like a best in slot, you know? Could have definitely been a bit more explorative and experimental with the drops that they've got, especially considering how much the game is now opened up for new items to be discovered and new metas and so forth. It's like, if things have certain elemental weaknesses, why not make like an armor set that is good against things that are ice type or fire type, or, you know, it could be anything. It could be gauntlets, it could be something along those lines. Let me know what you guys think. I want to hear from you guys. When do you think it's acceptable to introduce that power creep? When is it, you know? Should it just be a case of boom, there's a new best in slot armor for such and such, or should it be a slow and gradual progression? Let me know what you think.